Japanese ace pilot Hiromichi Shinohara, also known as the Richthofen of the Orient, claimed 58 victories in a span of only 3 months. The 26-year-old pilot did not have any combat experience before being thrown into the fray during the summer of 1939. Shinohara participated in the largest concentration of fighter aircraft the world had ever seen since the end of World War I, and got his ace status for fighting in Mongolia during the Battles of Khalkhin Gol against the Soviet Union. Those who witnessed Shinohara in action aboard his light and versatile Nakajima Ki-27 fighter believed he was the incarnation of a kami, or Japanese god, as he often faced entire enemy formations by himself in his quest for the glory of the emperor. Conquering Manchuria. When the influence of both China and Korea began to decline in the early 20th century, both Japan and Russia decided to intervene and expand their empires. The First Sino-Japanese War of 1894 and 1895 ensued, with British, German, American, and other European governments also involved. All major world powers had territories in the region, but Tsarist Russia was the biggest combatant. Frictions over Manchurian and Korean lands eventually led to the Second Russo-Japanese War of 1904 and 1905. After a humiliating defeat, Russia was forced to sign the Treaty of Portsmouth in August of 1905, ending its territorial ambitions in Asia and leaving Japan in total control of Korea. The Empire of Japan then set its sights on Manchuria, but it would have to recover first, as it faced bankruptcy due to the costly war. Hiromichi Shinohara was born during this time in August of 1913. He belonged to a farming family that lived in Suzuminomiya, near Utsunomiya in the Tochigi Prefecture. After finishing his primary education, Hiromichi Shinohara went into military service and joined the 27th Cavalry Regiment in early 1931. He quickly demonstrated his talent as a rider and a soldier. At the time of Shinohara's service, the reinvigorated Empire of Japan was ready to invade and conquer Manchuria, China. In September of 1931, Japanese forces invaded Chinese territory to begin the occupation, using the Wampaoshan and Mukden incidents as an excuse. As a cavalryman, Shinohara participated in the Zhangchao campaign, culminating in almost total Japanese control of Manchuria. When the campaign ended by mid-November, Shinohara requested a transfer. He had witnessed the horrors of war firsthand and wanted to delve right into the action. Hiromichi then chose the air cavalry and enrolled in the Tokorozawa Flying School in 1933 to get a taste of actual aerial combat. He graduated flight school a year later and became a corporal in the 1st Chutai of the 11th Hiko Datai. Shinohara's fighter squadron was then stationed in Harbin, Manchuria, as a quick reaction force in case the Soviets decided to support the Chinese. All the men in Shinohara's unit were trained to fly the old Kawasaki Ki-10 biplane fighter and the brand new state-of-the-art Nakajima Ki-27 fighter, which made its debut in 1936. The airmen were eager to prove their worth to the emperor, but it would take 3 years until the Soviets decided it was their turn to get a piece of Manchuria for Comrade Joseph Stalin. The Nomonhan Incident. After the Empire of Japan established the puppet state of Manchukuo in northeast China and Inner Mongolia in 1932, the Japanese were determined to continue invading China. By 1937, they had seized Shanghai and Nanking. These events, along with the anti-Comintern Pact signed with the Third Reich a year before, worried Soviet ruler Joseph Stalin. Consequently, he sent military aid to the Chinese to fight off the Japanese invaders, which led to constant altercations at the border between Manchuria and the Soviet Union. The conflict then escalated after several clashes at the border of Japanese-occupied Manchuria and Communist Mongolia. The Japanese insisted that the border between both countries was Khalkhin Gol, or the Khalkha River, but the Soviets disagreed. Several confrontations occurred at the Khalkha River in May of 1939, as each side amassed more than 30,000 men. But the gruesome battles worsened as Stalin summoned General George Zhukov, one of the few survivors of his terrible purges. Infantry, tanks, armored vehicles, and fighter and bomber aircraft slowly arrived for full-scale combat. From May through September of 1939, the Empire of Japan and the Soviet Union waged war over the skies of Mongolia and its eastern desertic lands. The conflict would be known as the Nomonhan Incident, or the Battles of Khalkhin Gol. It was during these days that Hiromichi Shinohara's unit was finally called to action to strike fear into the hearts of the Soviets. Soviet squadrons. As the Japanese Army Air Force was dispatched to attack, the Soviets had already established air superiority in the region, with 3 squadrons of Polikarpov I-16 Type 10 monoplanes and 6 squadrons of Polikarpov I-152 biplanes. The I-116, or Flying Barrel, was the world's first production monoplane with retractable landing gear and was equipped with 4 7.62mm machine guns. The aircraft was challenging to fly, but it was fast and could climb rapidly when needed. Meanwhile, the I-152 biplane was also equipped with 4 7.62mm machine guns and proved to be highly stable under crosswinds and the extreme conditions of the windy Mongolian desert. Both Soviet aircraft featured armor plates in the pilot's seat and were piloted by veterans of the Spanish Civil War. The more than 100 Soviet aircraft easily knocked down Japanese ground troops in the Mongolian plains, where there was little to no cover. The Soviet superiority would last until one day they witnessed a squadron of brand-new Nakajima Ki-27 monoplane fighters approaching the battlefield. And at the front of the formation was young Hiromichi Shinohara, ready to unleash the might of Japan upon the enemy. The Richthofen of the Orient. During his first combat sortie on May 29, 1939, Shinohara downed 4 Soviet Polikarpov I-16 fighters. He fought bravely the entire day, dogfighting against single enemy fighters and then firing into enemy positions. Many pilots in his squadron believed it was beginner's luck, but Shinohara went on to prove his thirst for glory when he claimed 6 more enemy aircraft the next day during a single encounter. Shinohara had become an ace in the first 24 hours of his first combat experience. His Nakajima Ki-27 monoplane was well pitched against the enemy. While the Soviet fighters had better armor and more firepower, the Ki-27 was faster, more agile, and more accurate. The Ki-27 was equipped with only 2 7.7mm Type 89 machine guns, but had excellent maneuverability and an outstanding turning ability that made it easier to land accurate shots. The Japanese managed to take down more than 1,300 enemy aircraft, and their losses amounted to over 100. Its pilots, like Shinohara, had an outstanding accuracy ratio. Shinohara continued to take down Soviet fighters in the following days. But these battles between both air forces were not isolated dogfights, but colossal engagements involving hundreds of aircraft while ground troops engaged in combat down below. The scale of these battles echoed the last days of World War I. On June 27th, Shinohara flew into a massive 150 aircraft battle over the skies of Tamask Bulak. In the heat of combat, Shinohara downed 11 enemy aircraft and was forced to back out only because he ran out of ammunition. He then earned the nickname the Richthofen of the Orient in honor of the infamous Red Baron, and was feared by Chinese and Soviet pilots alike. His tactics were controversial but effective. Shinohara was known for being the only Japanese pilot who charged into the heart of enemy formations to maximize the damage. Legend says that Soviet formations always broke as they spotted Shinohara, who would make a turn to pick off the lone Polikarpov fighters that left their groups. An ace pilot. On July 24th, Shinohara was shot down after being cornered by Soviet aircraft. He crashed down on enemy territory along with another pilot. They both managed to evade capture by crawling through the trenches under the fire of Soviet infantry and tanks. Impressively, they made it back alive and got to fly again. During the following days, Shinohara took control of the skies and downed between 4 and 6 enemy I-15s a day. According to Soviet sources, it is said that after one Soviet pilot parachuted from his burning aircraft, a Japanese pilot nearby closed in and tore apart the parachute with his wingtip. Some believed it was Shinohara himself, but it was never proven. However, just like the Red Baron and his astonishing streak, Shinohara's luck eventually ran out. On August 27th, after turning 26 years old, Shinohara was conducting a bombing escort mission when he was attacked by an overwhelming enemy force. Realizing that they had to act quickly, Shinohara and the remaining Ki-27s made one last charge. The less than a dozen Japanese fighters took on the entire 100-plus enemy formation in a suicidal frontal attack. Shinohara took 4 aircraft down before getting completely surrounded and shot down over Mohorehi Lake. Ultimately, the legendary pilot managed to take down 58 Soviet aircraft in just 3 months of air combat service. Warrant Officer Hiromichi Shinohara was posthumously promoted to the rank of second lieutenant. The Richthofen of the Orient had earned his place on the list of Japan's top aces. Like and subscribe to our Dark Skies channel to find out more exciting content about aviation history. And please tell us in the comments below about other topics of your interest.